I thought my days had grown predictable. Quiet mornings, familiar routines, and evenings that ended with the same soft hum of the house settling into itself. But then my son returned home with news that caught me off guard. News that left an impression so strong I could feel it shifting the ground beneath me. That afternoon became a turning point, one I didn't see coming, but one that changed me in ways I'm still discovering. Before I begin, I want to ask all of you watching, where are you tuning in from tonight? Which city? Which town? I'd love knowing where people are joining me, because it makes telling this story feel less like I'm speaking into the air and more like we're gathered in one room sharing something that matters. So, tell me, where are you listening from right now? My name is Carolyn and I'm 62 years old. I live in a modest two-story home with a porch I've cared for like a friend, pots of geraniums in the summer, pumpkins in the fall, and lights in the winter. My son Patrick moved out years ago, carving his path into the world the way sons do. But every so often he comes back through my door, bringing with him a burst of energy and a piece of life I don't often see. That afternoon began like so many others. I was in a kitchen, the smell of fresh bread still lingering in the air, sunlight falling across the wooden table where I sat with a cup of tea. The house was quiet except for the soft creak of its bones and the occasional hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard the door open, followed by the sound of footsteps I'd have known anywhere. Mom. His voice carried a mixture of excitement and hesitation. I turned, smiling already. Patrick, what a surprise. He came into the kitchen, taller than I remembered somehow, though I knew he hadn't grown an inch in years. There was something in his eyes, something bright but serious, as if he were carrying a weight he wasn't sure how to set down. I didn't call ahead, he said she-ish. I needed to see you. You don't need a reason to come home, I told him, though I could sense that he had one. I motioned to the chair across from me. Sit down. Tell me what's going on. He sat, folding his hands in front of him, the way he used to when he was nervous. As a boy. For a moment, he just looked around the kitchen, the familiar curtains, the worn table, the bread cooling on the counter. I could see him grounding himself in the space. Mom, he began slowly. I've made a decision, and I know it might surprise you. I waited, my heart steady but alert, as if bracing for whatever might come next. I'm moving back, he said. Finally. At least for a while. I need a change, and I need to be closer to you. The words landed with a weight I hadn't expected. My breath caught in my throat. Not from worry, but from the sudden shift in the air. He built a life for himself in another city, busy and full. And though I missed him, I never thought he'd consider returning. Moving back, I repeated softly, wanting to be sure I'd heard right. Yes, he said, his eyes steady now. I've been thinking about it for months. My jaw feels hollow. The city feels loud but empty. And every time I picture what matters, I picture this house. I picture us. I want to start fresh. And I think I need to start here. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart was beating faster, the way it does when life hands you something both unexpected and deeply precious. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Patrick, that's a lot to take in. But it's good news. It's wonderful news. I just want to understand what brought you here. He leaned back, exhaling as though releasing a burden he'd been carrying alone. I think I realized that success without connection isn't enough. I've been chasing something I don't even care about anymore. And I missed you, Mom, more than I let myself admit. Hearing him say it, the honesty in his voice left an impression that went straight through me. It wasn't just that he wanted to come home. It was that he had allowed himself to name what he needed to strip away pride and return to something real. We talked for hours, the afternoon stretching into evening as the light shifted across the kitchen. He told me stories about the city, about the long hours, the empty apartment, the way even crowded streets can feel lonely. And I shared my own quiet days, the way I had grown used to solitude, but never stopped hoping for company. At one point, he looked at me with an intensity one hadn't seen in years. I don't want you to feel like I'm a burden, he said. This isn't about me failing. It's about me choosing differently, choosing what matters. Tears pricked my eyes, but I smiled. Patrick, you could never be a burden. You're my son. If anything, this feels like a gift I didn't know I'd receive. We moved to the porch as the sky turned pink, the air cooling with the onset of evening. He sat beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, and for a long time we didn't speak. We just watched the world settle around us, both of us knowing that something important had shifted. When he finally rose to leave, he hugged me tighter than he had in years. I'll be back soon, he promised with boxes. I stood there on the porch after he left, the echo of his words circling in my mind. My son was coming home, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. That afternoon, his confession left an impression so strong, it kept my heart racing into the night. It wasn't just about him returning. It was about the reminder that life still holds Surprises still offers chances to begin again, no matter how much time has passed. And I knew then that this was only the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. By morning, the house had a different gravity. Nothing had physically changed. Same kettle, same creak in the third stair, same streak of light across the kitchen floor, but all of it felt newly present, as if my rooms had been waiting for the news Patrick brought and could finally settle around it. I made coffee and a pan of scrambled eggs I knew he liked when he was little, set 2 plates out without thinking, then laughed at myself and put one back. Old reflexes have a way of announcing themselves kindly. I walked down the hall to the room that used to be his. For years it had been my catch-all. Extra quilts, an old sewing machine that behaved when it wanted to. Boxes of photographs I meant to sort one of these days. I stood in the doorway and tried to see it the way he might. What to keep, what to move, what might make it feel like home, without erasing the life I'd made here alone. I rolled up my sleeves and began quilts to the cedar chest, sewing machine to the closet. I stacked the photos on the desk and let the dust turn my hands gray with history. By the time his truck pulled into the drive, the room had exhaled. Patrick came in with 2 boxes and the grin he used to wear after winning a backyard race he'd invented himself. Behind him came a steady procession of his life in cardboard, books, kitchen things, the plant that had survived 3 apartments, framed posters from bands he swore meant more than the music. We moved like people who knew each other's rhythms. He carried. I cleared a path. We traded jokes that didn't need punchlines. Neighbors wandered over with hells and helpful hands. Mrs. Ruse from across the street brought lemonade and news of Saturday's block cleanup. We'll put him to work, she said, squeezing my arm. Welcome home, Patrick. When the last box thumped onto the rug, we stood looking at the small mountain we'd made. He rubbed the back of his neck the way he does when he's about to make a plan. Ground rules? He asked, turning toward me. I don't want to be a ghost who eats your groceries or a project you have to manage. I smiled at his care. Okay, ground rules. You label your leftovers. You tell me before you invite a dozen friends over to rewatch a game. And you let me know if you need quiet and I'll do the same. He nodded, relieved. I can also contribute for utilities and groceries, and I'll take Wednesday. Dinner's non-negotiable. Accepted, I said. We shook on it because agreements like to be witnessed. While we unpacked, he asked for permission, the way a good guest becomes a good housemate. May I swap this lamp with the One in the den? Yes. Mind if I put my desk by the window? Please. Okay, if I replace this wobbly shelf. Bless you. Consent became a shared language. Small, ordinary, respectful. It eased us into our new shape. We took a break on the porch steps with lemonade, sweating in our hands. The maple across the street held that late afternoon, green like a secret it didn't mind keeping. After a while, Patrick said, "There's more to my news than just moving back." He waited to see if I had space for it. I did. I turned down a promotion, he said simply. It would have been more money and less time, which sounds good. Until you realize the less time is for the things that matter. I applied for a position at the community college instead, teaching evening classes in project management and workplace communication. They called me yesterday. I start next month if I want it. I felt the warmth rise in my chest, the kind that isn't about pride exactly, but recognition. Do you want it? He looked out at the street, considering. I want work that leaves me able to recognize myself at the end of the day. I want to build something in the same city where I put my head down to sleep. And this is the part that surprised me. I want to be available to this house, to you, to this block. The promotion would have bought a nicer couch. This job might buy me back my life. I reached for his hand, and he let me take it. The way grown children do when they remember. That age changes shape but not tenderness. If you choose it, I said, you won't be choosing it alone. We spent the next week fitting ourselves into the new routine. In the mornings, I heard his footsteps overhead and smiled into my coffee. He learned which cabinet the cereal hid in. I learned that he still whistles when he's concentrating. We fell into small habits that felt like thread stitching two pieces of fabric, distinct but stronger for the seam. On Wednesday, he made dinner as promised. Roasted vegetables and chicken with too much rosemary and exactly the right amount of laughter at the smoke alarms. Accusation. When I reached for the dishes, he asked, "May I do them?" And I said, yes. Because letting someone help is its own kind of strength. There was one awkward moment, as there must be in any honest story. Mr. Lane, from the corner, retired, opinionated, generous when you need a ladder, less so. With his commentary, stopped Patrick at the curb one afternoon. I could hear him from the garden, voice pitched just loud enough to float back already. Couldn't hack the city, huh? The words landed with the dull thought of a door shutting carelessly. Patrick's answer came measured, not sharp. I came back on purpose, Mr. Lane. There's work here I want to do. Mr. Lane harumphed, which is a language of its own, and shuffled on. Later, Patrick found me among the hydrangeas and said, "I know what I chose, but wow, people really have a story ready for you." "We can write ours louder," I said, brushing soil from my knees. "Or we can live it and let the volume take care of itself." He smiled, and the sting dissolved into something useful, a reminder to be clear without being defensive. On Saturday, we drove to the college to walk the campus. It's not large, which is part of its charm. Brick buildings with practical names, a patch of green where students eat sandwiches and rehearse arguments they'll lose and learn from. We stood outside the adult education office while he rehearsed, palm pressed to his chest the way he did before big tests in middle school. "Want me to wait?" I asked. "Would you?" he said. "I feel less like I'm drifting." I sat on a bench under a tree that had grown older than any syllabus. I watched people come and go, each person carrying a whole novel under their coat. When Patrick came out, his fakes held the kind of calm you don't fake. He sat beside me and let the news arrive in its own time. "It's mine if I want it," he said finally. 2 nights a week, 1 Saturday a month. They asked if I could help design a workshop for folks changing careers late. "Seems like you're fluent," I said. He laughed in relief, then grew quiet. "There's one more piece," he added, turning toward me. "I didn't want to tell you until I knew I could carry it. I've been talking with the director at the community center. They're launching a renovation, after-school tutoring, a small makerspace, a community reading room. They want someone to coordinate the project. It's part-time, paid enough, and I thought of you. Your library volunteering. You're an act for making a room feel like it was always meant for company." He took a breath. "Would you consider doing it with me?" "I don't mean as my helper. I mean as my partner." Didn't answer at once. Sometimes the heart needs to catch up to the invitation. I pictured the old red brick building by the park, the peeling paint, the piano missing 3 stubborn keys, the bulletin board with flyers layered like seasons. I pictured my hands stacking books, naming a corner quiet, teaching a child how to hold a pair of scissors like a friend. I pictured my son down the hall showing teenagers how to plan a project and keep their word to themselves. My throat tightened and then loosened like a door that needed oil. "Yes," I said, the word landing with the clean click of a key finding its lock. "I'd like that very much." We celebrated with sandwiches from the deli that knows our order without asking. Back home, we drew a rough map of the reading room on a piece of junk mail. The shelves along the north wall, a Round table in the sun, a basket of old-fashioned magnifying glasses because we're not pretending vision is what it was when we were 20. We argued kindly about beanbags. Trip hazards, I said. Cowardice, he countered. We compromised. 2 beanbags conspicuously bright. The following week felt like a series of small doors opening. We met with the community center board and said the word yes enough times to make it musical. We visited the thrift store and found a wooden sign that simply read welcome, and we both agreed it was our job description. On Tuesday evening, Patrick taught his first class. I waited up like a fool, just as I had when he was 16 and out at a game, knitting a scarf I didn't need because my hands wanted the dignity of work. He came home later than I'd expected, his face shining with the honest tired of doing the right thing. They were nervous, he said, dropping into a chair. I was nervous. We said it out loud, and the room survived. Mom, I forgot how good it feels to watch someone understand themselves a little better in real time. Keep that sentence, I said. It'll hold up on hard days. There were hard days, paint that wouldn't cover, a grant application that wanted answers we didn't have yet. My own old ache in the knees, reminding me that ladders are rude at our age. One evening, the power went out in a thunderstorm while we were sorting donated books by the shape of their spines. We lit candles and laughed at how quickly a room becomes a campfire. The rain wrapped the windows, and Patrick read aloud from a book we weren't sure anyone would want to check out, his voice pitching the words into the dark like stones that make a path across water. When the lights nudged back on, we were still sitting close. 2 people in a room becoming a place at home. We learned to ask each other simple permission in a way that made the house gentler. May I put laundry on after 9? Mind if I have the TV up for the game? Would you like a ride to church, or do you want to walk? Can I hug you, or is today not a hugging day? Consent, I discovered, isn't only for romance. It's how adults care for one another without taking what isn't offered. It turned our daily living into a series of chosen moments. About a month in, we finally hung our welcome sign above the reading room door. We brewed coffee in a dented percolator, set out a plate of store-bought cookies that tasted better because someone else had done the work, and opened the doors. The first person in was Mrs. Roos with her grandson, who chose a book about space and then fell asleep in a sun patch with it open on his chest. A man I had only ever seen walking alone sat with a newspaper and nodded to anyone who met his eye. 2 teenage girls asked if they could host a weekly quiet study hour, even though they both clearly adored talking. We said yes and let the room teach them the difference. At closing time, Patrick and I stood in the doorway and watched the last of the daylight press itself onto the floorboards. "Look what we made," he said softly. "We didn't make it," I corrected. "We made room for it." He turned to me then, and I saw him the way you do when a loved one steps into a light you didn't know they were meant for. Not as my child exactly, and not as my child. As a person, I would choose to know even if he weren't mine. He reached for my hand. "May I?" he asked, as if we hadn't been practicing this for weeks. "Yes," I said, and we stood like that, two people who had decided that beginning again is not a synonym for failure. It is another word for courage. On the porch that night, after he'd gone up to his room and the house had found its hush again, I thought about the afternoon he returned with news that changed the angle of my days. The impression it left wasn't a stamp. It was a doorway. On the other side was life I recognized and hadn't allowed myself to expect. Mornings with shared coffee, evenings with meaningful tired. A community that felt less like a place and more like a practice. I'm 62. My son is a grown man who came home on purpose and asked me to join him in work. That matters to us both. When I tell you, my heart still beats faster thinking about it. Understand this. It isn't racing from fear. It's marching steady and glad to the rhythm of a life we are building with clear words, small permissions, and a welcome sign over the door.